The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, back with Sam. How you doing, Sam?
He is risen, but the Phoenix Suns are not, as we are here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to start.
You're fine.
I'm sorry to start it like that, guys. We're here to officially put the Phoenix Suns to rest, which thank God we've been looking forward to doing for months. Of course, we have a very special guest here. Mike, I'll let you introduce him.
Yeah. Also joining us is our friend, our lawyer, as we say on the podcast, Max McCauley. Max, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I put the Suns to rest personally like 4 months ago, so I'm you're a little late to the party for me. I know you'd do a podcast and all, so.
Yeah, we had to keep doing this podcast every week throughout maybe the most brutal stretch. We did the first season, same season you guys started, 19 wins, and Sam and I described this season as worse because there was no hope. For that 19-win season, there was a lot of hope. And, I mean, do you agree with that this season was worse?
Infinitely
you podcasted
worse
that season.
Yeah,
exactly.
Listen, back then it was, of course they weren't very good, but at least, like you said, there was hope, there was young guys. I feel like the players actually tried and cared about what they were doing on the court, so that was a marked difference from this season. So, I could not agree more.
Even Isaiah Canaan back then. Just out there trying.
God, I forgot about that name.
What would he have been, the sixth best player on this team this year?
The three-headed starting point guard monster of Isaiah Canaan, DeAnthony Melton, and Eli Okobo, I believe, that season.
Man,
and somehow
Devin's
this
put
was
up with
better.
himself, hasn't he?
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, at the beginning of every season, and by the way, this is our 6th season doing this. If you remember, I said that at the beginning of the season as well. But at the beginning of the season, Max, Sam, and I get together every season for 6 seasons in a row. We go over a bunch of made-up over-unders. We release those as over-unders that the fans and listeners of the podcast can also vote on. And then we come back at the end of the season, essentially to laugh at how optimistic we were at the beginning of the season. This season is going to be particularly interesting as we go through and talk about what we chose for all of those over-unders. And of course, we'll figure out who got the most right and congratulate that person in this season. It's sort of like winning the Dan Marley Hustle Player of the Year award this year, in that nobody hustled. So it's not the most exciting award this year, but I think for this over-under award, it's going to be a similar result here. But Max, we haven't talked to you really since the beginning of the season. It sounds like you checked out at some point during the season. I guess a good place to start is, at what point did you know that this season was doomed?
Yeah, good question. I don't remember exactly when I checked out. It was definitely, I didn't watch a game in this year, 2025. I know that. I think, obviously they started really well. They were, I think, was it 7-1? I think it was just kind of in the next month where they just skidded so badly, and you started to feel some of the body language stuff. And I have a rule in life where if I don't watch athletes who don't care, I'm not going to care about them if they don't care. That's why I don't watch the All-Star game. I just to me it's weird. And this team clearly stopped caring. I don't know when exactly it happened. Maybe December, January, and it seems like it was related to Coach Bud, is what we're hearing now. At least that's what the media is saying. So I don't know. It was just an utter tire fire.
I really respect the approach, Max, just because, to be honest, like this season more than any other season that we've covered, and we've covered a handful of seasons now of the Suns, I have felt myself just forcing myself to watch and finish games, oftentimes on replay too, so I already know like what the result is. I know that 20-point blown third quarter is coming, and I still have to watch it. And I mean, just credit to you. It seems like you had a much better 4 months than I did. I don't know exactly.
I didn't have to do a podcast, so.
Was there anyone that you liked this season, at least when you were watching? Like, what do you have a Ryan Dunn opinion? I guess is how that question is. Yeah,
that was exactly what I was going to say. I thought he was fun. The rookies both were fun at various points during this season, and again, actually seemed like they cared, which made sense because they're rookies.
You would have loved Colin Gillespie if you had stuck around. That's
I thought I would have.
That's the one guy who kind of came around in the last 20 games of the season, and we were like, oh, everyone was like, sign this guy to a contract. He plays like he cares. He gets his hand on the ball. He gets steals. He gets great rebounder for his size too. So we're still waiting to see what happens with him. But yeah, if Colin Gillespie is the best selling point I could give you on the last 2 months of the season, obviously it was a complete abject failure, and you weren't really missing anything.
No, that's funny though. That's the infusion that they needed was Colin Gillespie. Right? It's just man, just add in a couple guys who try. And it sounds like, you guys are probably paying closer attention than I am, but it seems like that's what their direction's going to be, or at least that's what they're hinting at. Ishbia and co. is that we don't care about talent anymore. We care about trying. It seems like the mantra.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where he said he wants to build a team that reflects the people of Phoenix, and part of me was like, okay, I get that, and part of me was like taking my third break for the day at my job, going, no, don't do that. No, don't. But I do think that it's clearly a message that he's sending that this team is going to be the team that tries hard. The two teams that he referenced, I think one of them, very unsurprising, Michigan State, trying to find an identity. And I think that's actually not a bad one to mention, but we obviously understand the motivation there. The other one, and he's not a fan of this team, was the Pittsburgh Steelers. We didn't talk about this on our last podcast, Sam, but he mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think that went over my head.
Times.
I didn't even realize that he mentioned the Steelers. That's weird.
Multiple times, and then did it again on the radio when he went on to talk about it there. I think the idea being, if you can set an identity that can actually go across multiple teams, that can be something that is sustainable and long term. What is kind of interesting about that to me, and I think, Max, as you think about the offseason, I'm curious how you feel about that, is the history of the Suns is more in my mind, is more about sort of offensive innovation.
Yep.
And the idea of being ahead of the curve offensively. They did that a little bit in the past, Charles Barkley winning his MVP, that those teams are sort of ahead of the curve there. And then obviously we know the Steve Nash Suns, where they brought about this sort of pick and roll era of basketball that we're still living in to this day, in that they were the team that did it the most. They shot the most threes. They played the fastest. They were that team. But now they're trying to change that identity to be the team of hard workers. I'm not saying I mind here, but I do think there's something about it that misses the history of the Suns. And I understand as a reaction to this season why he's framing it this way. But what do you think, Max, about that future identity and just about this offseason in general?
Yeah, I have a couple of reactions to that. First of all, it's funny for him to cite the Steelers, given that they've had the same coach for 15 years, and we fire coaches every year now. So we're not exactly going in that direction so far. But no, it's a great point. The Suns have always been an offense. We have the Atlanta point guards, right? Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, you mentioned Chris Paul. KJ. We just had great point guards and not really good center play, I guess is kind of how we've been defined over time. And to be fair to him, maybe it betrays kind of an ignorance of the history of the Suns, but the Suns also have never won the title,
yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe we should shift the focus a little bit. So that's very interesting. I didn't hear some of those comparisons that he's making. I think he said. Yeah.
I have two thoughts. One is that it's very much an Ishbia, and again, I didn't catch this at the time, very much an Ishbia mannerism to not give respect to an immediate peer, aka another NBA owner, right? To not be we want to be like the Thunder. Because Ishbia, as a business owner, he doesn't operate that way. I think he views the other 29 NBA owners as his competition in some way.
Enemies.
His enemies.
Yeah.
We know he feels at least Dan Gilbert is his direct enemy. And I think the other 28 are some sort of competition for sure. So that makes sense to me just in my brain that he would be I don't want to compliment an NBA team here. Let me go for an NFL team instead. But also, he can talk all he wants, and we can talk all we want about giving them a defensive identity. They were the 29th best defense in the NBA this season. They've got such a long way to go to even be respectable on defense that it's I think that's nice. I think that's a great message for Ishbia to say, hey, we want guys who exemplify what the city of Phoenix means and who care. And obviously I support that message. I want to see that too. But let's just say I have my doubts, right? They have such a long way to go to become a decent defensive team that really is going to take quite a bit of work. They could nail 3 or 4 trades in a row and still not quite get there. Now, there is such a thing, and actually, Max, I would be curious about your take on this too, of like going too far in the other direction as a reaction.
Terry Porter.
Well, as a reaction,
You think Terry Porter's available?
more so just understanding like if they're gonna move away from this Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal direction, they can surround Devin Booker with athletic defensive players, and in many ways that's precisely what I want them to do. But there does also need to be an understanding that you need to build a working offense too, right, Max? And Devin Booker by himself, I mean, I know we've seen him in many phases throughout his career at this point. We've seen him against many different types of defensive systems, succeeding at the point guard position, at the shooting guard position. But we all know you probably can't build a contending offense around just Devin Booker, right? There needs to be like another high octane offensive option somewhere in there. And so I think really trying to find how you can get that guy next to Book in the next iteration of this team, and also at the same time build some sort of defensive hard-nosed identity around them. That's what makes this entire process so tough.
Yeah, and I think you're describing exactly why I'm gonna, my number one blasphemous opinion is that they probably should trade Devin Booker. I mean, I don't want to. I love the guy. He's probably my favorite athlete ever at this point. We've had a lot of great times with him. It's just, you've kind of described exactly why I feel that way. It's just going to be too hard to build this team into a contender again with him, right? I mean, he's the guy you could trade and actually get a ton back from maybe a team that lost to last night, potentially. I think I just like that's like KD will get something, right? They'll get something for KD. They'll probably have to cut Beal, and they'll be stuck with that. And they have draft picks that are bad for a while. Like they can put together like maybe a feisty 7 seed around Booker the next couple of years. That wouldn't shock me. But seeing them get back to contention with the likes of OKC around, particularly, I mean OKC is just insane with what they have, and it's not just them. Houston's got there's a lot of the West is crazy, and it's just so hard to imagine them. It's hard to imagine them doing it even by trading Booker. It's just a hard thing to do. But with Booker, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I think that opinion is defensible. And I understand what you mean because it's difficult to even say that you want it. Obviously, you don't necessarily want it. But if you're trying to look at the path that more likely leads to a contender down the line, that one is one that you have to consider. And I would almost make the argument that if they waive and stretch Beal, they're leaving the door open for that anyway. It kind of feels like, because they're just saying we're going to carry salary for a player that doesn't play on the team for the next 4 to 5 years. That kind of feels like a team that's willing to tank at some point, at the very least.
Max,
we'll see if that's something.
I am just curious. Like, okay, first of all, I think it's a very defensible position that you have as well, and I think it needs some representation on our podcast because we mostly haven't talked about trading Book.
Because they won't. Yeah,
well, exactly.
That's really why.
We're mostly approaching it from what we think is the pragmatic case. But I'm glad you said it. However, if they don't trade Book, because we're still anticipating that they won't. Can like a feisty 7th or 8th seed like that doesn't actually have any real shot at a championship next year, that is Devin Booker led, can that win you back? What does it take, Max McCauley, to win you back on the Suns?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, I would watch this. I would be back on the Suns and watch every game if they were a 12 seed, as long as they weren't miserable.
Yeah, okay.
It's less to me about how good or bad. Again, we watched, all of us on this podcast watched happily them win 19 games before, and win whatever it was 30 the year after that. Like when the product on the floor is pleasurable to watch. That's what I'm asking for. This season was just, and parts of last season too, but this season in particular was just absolute torture.
Yeah, I think there's no coincidence that Matt Ishbia started his press conference with embarrassing season and not fun to watch.
Yeah.
I think he knew that those two things were how Suns fans felt, and he needed to acknowledge those right off the bat here. Can I mention one more team that Matt Ishbia could not mention when talking about this identity and potentially building around a single offensive player? There's a team that won a championship in 2004 named the Detroit Pistons, that had Ben Wallace, Richard Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, Tayshaun Prince, Mehmet Okur, Corliss Williamson. And they're from the state he's from. They're also from the state Devin Booker lived in. Kind of feels like he wants to recreate that team a little bit, at least in identity. And it's hard to argue with that. Like, I don't necessarily think that type of team would work in today's NBA. But I guess in some senses, that's what the Houston Rockets are in some ways. Like, they don't really have offense. They're built entirely around defense. But to me, like, there's got to be some basketball identity built into him watching that team in the state that he lived in and grew up in, and trying to build something like that today. Does that make sense to you guys, that that's something that he's thinking about a little bit?
It would absolutely make sense, yeah. And I think that's kind of the polar opposite of what this team was, right? That team was just everybody ground every single game. The identity, you knew exactly who the Detroit Pistons were back then, right? I think, to me, it's more important to have an identity than what the identity is necessarily. Like, you just need to build something, and that's the opposite of what they had this season. So I absolutely would see that being the case.
The Pistons were always a special case. Obviously, they're one of like the few teams in NBA history that won a championship without a true, top 10 star in the NBA. So, of course, that's always hanging over their legacy and what made it so impressive. But I do think, like, if you poured it over the 2004-2005 Pistons into today's NBA, but just made all of them capable three-point shooters who took like 6 or 7 threes a game, then yeah, maybe that team could succeed. Like if Ben Wallace,
you're gonna make Ben Wallace the capable three-point shooter.
if Ben Wallace,
what's that comp? Yeah,
if Brooke Lopez had Ben Wallace's defensive talent, and Richard and Rip Hamilton was not like doing his little floppy action into a 16-foot mid-range jumper.
What do you mean? Booker's going to do that now?
But actually, pulling up into 10 threes a game, then yeah, that team has a chance in today's NBA for sure. The thing is, like, yeah, I mean, like, it's just funny because like we think about that team as like such hard-nosed defensive intensity, and all of that is true, but like they could play with the same intensity in today's league, but because of the spacing and because of like, slight rule changes, there were more rule changes if you go back to the 90s, but even from the 2000s, just like slight differences in physicality and how the game is called, you could have a team that is as defensively talented as that Pistons team, and they're probably giving up 109 a night. It's just where the NBA is now.
Yep.
I'm looking at the Basketball Reference page right now. Ben Wallace finished 7th in MVP that season, and he shot 49% from the free throw line. just throwing that out there when thinking about his 3-point shooting. He took 8 3-pointers, Sam. He was 1 for 8. He made 1 3.
That's going to be Oso Ighodaro next season. He's going to be 49% for the free throw line, but he's going to be Ben Wallace.
Well, I will say right now, I wanted to record Monday night either way, just in case something happened newsworthy, Suns related today. Nothing so far. The front office is still intact. There was some reporting by Dwayne Rankin about the Suns potentially adding somebody to the front office. We'll keep tabs on that. We'll figure out if that's something that we need to talk about in some sort of emergency podcast later this week. For now, nothing has changed. And I imagine they can't really move on into whatever the next step is, say, with a coaching search until they figure that out. You guys ready?
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there anything on the coaching front, like even a rumor? I haven't heard anything.
It seems like there are reporters just giving out a list of names that could be considered, and they're all like the most obvious coaching candidates you could think of. The one thing I think that seems to be pretty clear is they're not necessarily committed to going with the experienced coach route because of the last 2 guys. They seem to be considering assistant coaches, former players, that kind of thing to try to get guys in here. They're not going to look at Michael Malone and say he won a championship, therefore we should just hire him the way they did with the last 2 coaches. Or I think Taylor Jenkins is somebody that Gambo has also ruled out as somebody they're just not going to be interested in. They seem to want some sort of young... By the way, I mentioned that 2003-2004 Pistons team. The rumor was that Chauncey Billups was like very high in the list of coaches that the Suns were considering before he was given an extension by the Portland Trailblazers. So I think we could probably look at a former player maybe known for defense and consider that something that they're likely going to be looking for, but we don't really know for sure. Do you have opinions on any guy that you like?
No, not really. I do like that approach generally, though. I think going young, going analytic-driven kind of guy would make sense. Mark Daigneault, obviously you can't just pick that guy out of the crowd necessarily, but that seems like if you're going for the high end, especially if you're going to try to kind of rebuild something around Booker and instill an identity, I think that's probably the way I'd want to go.
Have you bought any coffee yet? If you haven't, it's time. Go to alchemyroaster.com. Use the promo code TIMELINE to get 10% off some coffee from a local coffee roaster called Alchemy Roast. Alchemy Roast is about more than just coffee. It's about passion, dedication, and community. They're a small batch roastery committed to sourcing the finest beans and mastering the art of the roast, and they do it ethically. That's right, ethical coffee. This is my favorite coffee beans that I have found, and it's local here in Phoenix. My favorite is the Colombian honey. I make it into espresso. I highly recommend it if you have an espresso machine, but it's also really good if you just make it with drip coffee. You can also try the Guatemalan single origin beans. They're excellent as well. Taste like chocolate. They're really good. AlchemyRoaster.com is the website. Promo code is Timeline. You can go there, buy coffee, get 10% off, support them, and support us. It's AlchemyRoaster.com. Promo code Timeline. Check it out. Let them know we sent you.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
All right, let's talk about the over-unders, the ones we figured out from last year, the ones we all did a great job guessing on. It's going to be pretty funny to go through these, as it always is, and we'll see where we all end up here.
Weirdly, I feel...
Let's start.
I don't want to say I feel confident, because that's not true. But weirdly, since so many of these are not like team success-based, I feel like maybe we didn't do as horrible a job as we think going in. Or Mike, do you already know?
I already know.
Okay, all right.
So I won't give away anything here, but have you won before, Sam? I think
I have. I've won once at least.
Okay.
I think maybe only once, and I can't remember which year it was.
I think everyone's won at least once, in that Max has won, I've won, and you've won, and I think the fans have also won once, and they got the most right, which is probably in one of the more optimistic seasons where they exceeded all expectations, because most of the time, the fans tend to just go for the overs, although that's not necessarily the case this time. So let's start here. There was a brand new point guard added to the Suns that we were all very excited about that ended up massively, disappointing. I'm curious, actually, what you think. But we had 2 Tyus Jones ones. Assists per game and points per game. The assists per game were 7.5 is the number that I had set. By the way, I set the lines, and we just guessed based on that for those who didn't listen to the beginning of the season. 12.5 points per game. He went under on both of those, which is not surprising because he lost minutes over time, and you just couldn't play him for long stretches of the game, so he had no chance to really go over on 7.5 assists or over on the 12.5 points per game because you couldn't play him. He couldn't play defense. He ended up finishing the season with 10.2 points per game and 5.3 assists per game. So for the assists, I went over. Both of you went under. So you guys both got that one. The people went over with me. So we missed that one. And then for the points, 12.5, everyone went under except Max. You went over on the points. So you missed that one. Max, what do you think about Tyus Jones this year?
I think you'd have to call it a disappointment, right? They ended up kind of benching him, right? I mean, again, I didn't watch a lot towards the end, but I know that he stopped playing very much and they got a little bit better, I think, right? When the Collins Gillespie started playing instead of him.
Well, they really shifted the offense into Booker's hands, and the offense started playing well finally.
Yeah. That was part of the reason. I mean, he was never going to hit 7.5, I guess, but like he was closer to that number in the part of the season that you watched, Max, and then eventually it was just like he was not controlling the offense anymore. So he would be out there in more bench-oriented lineups, and I have the stats here, like post All-Star break, he averaged 22 minutes a game and 4 assists, which is solid, but it's just like he didn't have the same amount of control over the offense at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a certain point, the offense just became, he dribbled it down, passed to Devin Booker, and then stood in the corner like PJ Tucker. And occasionally, he actually shot threes really well.
So well.
Throughout the entire season. And he would score when he was past the ball, but his utility on the court as just a spot-up shooter was so low because he's not a great defensive player. He's not getting the passes that you need him to get. He did, once again, have a good season when it comes to assist-to-turnover ratio. He didn't turn the ball over a lot. But if you can't handle the ball a lot and you're not turning it over a lot, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't really affect the team positively. And it is this weird thing where it is, I think, a disappointment overall. But he was a minimum contract player.
Yeah.
And he was a minimum contract player that was starting probably because they told him he would start. That's the assumption we made on the podcast all season, at least. And it's really tough to say that from the perspective of his salary that he was a disappointment, but the amount of pressure that the fan base put on him, and I think even the organization with thinking that having a point guard was going to solve all of the offensive woes that they had last season, that's pressure from the organization. And from that perspective, he massively underperformed. I mean, the main reason was he's not a good defender at all. Like, he just gets screened and then it's 4-on-5. Like, that's the rest of the possession, one single screen. And you can't start a point guard like that in today's NBA. There's too many good point guards in the NBA that can take him out of it immediately. So, Max, you didn't miss much, I think, in not watching the rest of the season. What he did at the beginning of the season was probably his best stretch. And it really
sounds like he was disappointing, but it wasn't really his fault, right? I guess the way you'd put it, like he was who he is. He was Tyus Jones. We tried to put him into a position that he wasn't ever going to succeed in, really.
Yeah, we tried to, as we described it, create Chris Paul in the aggregate, and you can't do that. Chris Paul is a legend for a reason. But anyway, good job. We all got at least one of those. Sam, you got both. So your confidence, I guess, so far is not unearned.
Well, and yeah, just to kind of reiterate what you guys are talking about, like, honestly, I feel like Tyus met my expectations, even though I did go under on both of those stats. I think he met my expectations offensively. I did not expect him to be like a first percentile. Like, I think you're underselling it a little bit, Mike. I think he was not just a bad defender. I think he might have been a bottom 5 defender in the NBA this season. And there was just no saving him from that. If he was a 30th percentile defender, then okay, maybe it could have worked. But I evidently did not watch enough film, or maybe his athleticism collapsed. But I was not expecting him to be that terrible on that end of the ball.
This next one's funny. It really makes me think, boy, were we young and optimistic back then, 6 months ago or whatever it was when we recorded this. But before the season, you'll all remember, a lot of talk, nationally, locally, on our podcast, was how many three-point attempts Jusuf Nurkic was going to take this season. And they talked about it. Like, a big talk on like national podcasts was Mike Budenholzer. He's got Jusuf Nurkic shooting threes in practice. And look, so I set the over-under not on like a really high number, but 125 total three-point attempts. On the season, Jusuf Nurkic, well, first of all, I'll say I went under. Sam, you went over. Max, you went under. And the people went over. He hit the under. No surprise
That was
there.
a really good line, dude.
He can't shoot. The thing is, he did end up shooting 105.
105. So you are only 20 off with your line.
Only 20 off. He shot 59 of them on the Suns, which makes sense. Most of his games are played on the Suns this season. Lost minutes. Became a absolute pariah on the Suns. Apparently beefed with the coach. We learned from Chris Haynes that Mike Budenholzer called him into his office. I don't know if you've heard this story, Max. Mike Budenholzer called Nurkic into his office and said he was a bad teammate. And it was like related to his screening somehow, which is one thing that he was good at, I think, throughout his time here in Phoenix. But he tried to shoot threes. He's not a shooter. I think the dream of Jusuf Nurkic ever being a good three-point shooter is completely dead. Any thoughts on Jusuf Nurkic, Max?
I will tell you what, I actually had memory hold this. I think it was just so horrible, but he was driving me absolutely up a wall to start this season. I don't think I've ever hated watching a player more than I hated watching him when the season started. He was so bad. I think it's part of what drove me away. And obviously eventually they traded him, and I still wasn't watching, but man, was he bad when it started.
Well, again, this covers a part of the season that you didn't tune into, Max, but he was so bad that we talked ourselves into Nick Richards as his replacement. Who then continued to be, let's be honest, not
terrible.
Like not Nurkic level bad, but Nick Richards was bad for the 30 games that he started.
Nick Richards is not a starting NBA center.
No, he's just not.
And Yusuf Nurkic was not only not a starting NBA center, I say through that stretch of basketball that you watched, Max, he was not an NBA player.
No, well, also he kept trying to do so much stuff. Like he just kept trying to do everything, and he would turn the ball over on like 4 straight possessions sometimes, and just be like, "Dude, just stop doing things."
It really is a credit to Frank Vogel for the season that he got out of Nurkic in the previous year, because he was not terrible last year. He wasn't great either, but he wasn't like one of the worst NBA players in the league, and I think he legitimately was one of the worst NBA players in the league last year. So. Or this last season. So really tough season for him. And the Suns ended up having to attach a first-round pick to him in order to get off of him, which is not a great sign for the Suns going forward, that they're already having to do things like that. We'll see what this offseason ends up entailing, but glad he's gone. I feel bad for him because I really think, like, as far as match of coach to player, it sounds like from the behind the scenes there could not have been a worse match there, and it led to the worst season of his career and one of the worst seasons I've ever seen for the Suns. But you had any other thoughts on him, Sam?
Well, just that last point you made, it's so funny how oftentimes we talk about, like, you know, when a new coach is hired or when a new player is coming in, we really thought that on the court, Bud would be the best possible thing for Nurk's career. And then you get behind the scenes and, like, it turns out you actually have to know more about these guys' personalities and who they are off the basketball court a little bit. In order to really examine the fit. So, yeah, we just could not have been more wrong.
I'm surprised he didn't learn how to do those wine dinners from Greg Popovich, where you're taking out all the players to drink wine and learn about them. Yeah, there was some leadership missing there. We really hit the ball out of the park as far as picking the 2 worst players on the Suns this year to start our over-under episode with Tyus Jones and Yusuf Nurkic.
We haven't brought up
the 2 biggest
Bradley Beal
disappointments.
yet. What are you talking about?
That's a good point. And there is only one Bradley Beal one, so we'll get to him later. Let's talk about a player we actually like this year. That's Ryan Dunn. And we set the Ryan. This is how confident we were at the beginning of the season, or at least I was, because I made these up. The over-unders I chose for both rookies were how many games they were going to play, because we thought this team had a roster that the players could actually play games. And I said it at half the season, 41 games for both rookies. For Ryan Dunn, I went under because they had a bunch of wings, I thought. Sam, you went over. Max, you went under as well, and the people went over. He played 74 games, started half the season, essentially, and was maybe one of the only bright spots for the Suns this entire year was Ryan Dunn. But yeah, Sam, you got that right. But Max, what do you think about Ryan Dunn?
Yeah, I actually recall that. I think that we did this before the preseason thing where he was amazing from 3, right?
Yeah.
That way I had to change my opinion a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he was a real bright spot. It was fun to see somebody with some athleticism on this team for once. And, you know, the right attitude. I think there's a lot to like about Ryan Dunn, especially. And I know the shooting kind of came and went a little bit this season, but the fact that he's even where he is just a monumental leap from where he was in college. So, yeah, future's very bright. That's one of the only things that went well this season.
What do you think, Sam?
I'm a little disappointed just that, and I know I got this right, but he played 74 games. Only a couple guys on this roster played more. Tyus played 81, Booker 75, and Royce 75, and I think that's it. But he was 7th in minutes. He just should have played more minutes. And it was not a case of him really racking up. I think there were a couple of DNP CDs in there in the middle of the season, but for the most part, it was just that he was still finding his way onto the court, but for like 6 minutes, at a time, and just in a way where he could not develop momentum no matter what, which is just one of the biggest crying shames about this season. Like the way that Bud handled one of his biggest failures, the way that he handled the development of the rookies was why I was more than happy to see him go ultimately.
Yeah, my thinking was that he was going to be more of a project, and I think he actually was. Like, if the Suns were actually good this year, he may have still played, because I think he had times where how well he played was a difference maker enough. But I do think the shooting would have really hurt him on any good team, just the fact that he was inconsistent with his shot. In a way, it's good that they were bad enough that he played as much as he did, in that you're sort of building towards next year and see if he can have some confidence in that shot next year, which I think was his biggest plus offensively, is that he wasn't afraid to shoot it. He shot it basically every time. Shout out to KD and Book, because as bad as the season went, they definitely were on top of Ryan Dunn about shooting it when he was wide open. They made him do it, and he continued to do it throughout the season. But, I thought he just wouldn't be ready to play as much as he was, and he was able to do it. And I'm looking forward to watching him next year. I hope they don't trade him, because who knows? He seems to represent what the identity is going to be going forward, so I doubt they're going to try to trade him. The other rookie, Oso Ighodaro, same thing, 41 games. He played 61, so also went over. And I went over. Sam, you went over. Max, you went under. And the people went over. On this one, the thought process was here, there really was only 3 bigs. If anyone missed time, I thought he would play more. It ended up that towards the end of the season, Max, you missed it. They were healthy, and they were playing Oso Ighodaro just because he was better than basically both of the centers that were playing towards the end of the year. Actually, Mason Plumlee, he's not on here, but he wasn't as bad as a lot of people make him out to be. He was fine. Nick Richards was not very good, and Oso Ighodaro earned more minutes towards the end of the season when he started playing pretty well. What do you think about Oso Ighodaro going forward, Max?
Really do like what I saw from him. He's really a smart player with a lot of touch. You got to see a little bit of Brandon Clark from Memphis. He has limitations, obviously. He's never going to be like, a defensive weapon juggernaut just because of what he is. But I think he's shown that he's an NBA player for sure. It's a get for the second round, no doubt.
Yeah, they did get a lot of success out of just, their switch everything scheme with Oso on the court at a certain point in the season. And again, like, if he can't put on 30 pounds of muscle or something, then his way forward is just going to be develop some sort of jump shot and see if you can maybe be a tweener and play a little bit of power forward, right? That would be his path to, like, really truly playing 30 minutes per game on high level teams at the NBA level. Which is unlikely, of course. But like, I think that's how he would do it theoretically. But still, yeah, I was super impressed with Oso throughout the year. He was super efficient too, post All-Star break. And I think that's a great thing to take away. When you have a guy who's put into those positions and isn't fazed by suddenly playing 25, 30 minutes against good teams, and his true shooting percentage is still like in the mid-high 60s, which Oso's was post All-Star break. Of course, those are all basically shots at the rim or floaters.
And 2 a game because he's afraid to shoot.
Yeah, a couple floaters. But, like, I think that's good stuff. And so hope they don't trade him, too. Same thing you said about Ryan.
Yeah, the floater touch is really impressive. Like, and that kind of what gives you some hope that he could maybe develop into a 3-point shooter at some point, just because he just seems to be good at putting the ball
just
in the basket,
floating them up there from 25 feet out.
Just floater threes.
I've seen Wemby do it. Yeah, so Max, I know that you didn't get to see it, but I will say, I think, and I don't have the stats in front of me, I think the Suns still ended the season at their best defense when he played compared to the other centers. And it's because of coaching. I'll give credit to Bud here in that when he played, they switched everything. Just everything. He's not very big, as we know. He's not a tall center. Probably, if he could shoot, he'd be a power forward. Like, he'd be more like that. But because he can't shoot, he's just meant to be a center at this point. Also, he's a good screener, a good screen navigator. Like, he's pretty good at moving without the ball. But because
I should clarify. I don't necessarily mean he's like a defensive liability. Just so much he's never going to be like the best defensive player in the league or anything.
He can't play against big centers. They're just going to demolish him.
Yeah,
right?
And he doesn't have the length to be like a rim. I mean, it's the Bam Adebayo thing. I've thrown out that comparison with Oso a million times, just in terms of what their bodies are. Like, his length is limited, and it prevents him from being like a high level rim protector. But that's okay. He could still be a plus defender, just in other ways.
I actually think if you had to pick one thing to say for me that gave me the most confidence with him going forward, it's that he held his own in switches pretty well, especially for a rookie. I thought there were times that he was shutting down pretty good players, and the Suns still helped occasionally. If he got switched onto the wrong type of player, they would double and stuff like that. But that's kind of what you do with guys that are his size, and I think there's a path for him to being becoming a pretty effective backup center, doing sort of outside of shooting the Dario Saric stuff offensively, setting screens, passing the ball, getting the right players on the cut, or just really quick decision making on any traps, and then defensively switching everything and just finding ways to hold his own in those scenarios. I don't think he's probably has a future of being like a great starting NBA center at any time in his career. At least we haven't seen any evidence of that. But he was fun to watch, and I think he held his own on switches. I'm excited to watch him next year as well if they do end up keeping him.
Jabari Smith Jr. is going to look pretty good next to Oso next year, I think. I like that power forward center combo. You know, Jabari's got the stretch capability. He's 7 feet tall. He can, you know, weak side protect the rim a little bit. So, yeah, if Oso's going to play center, I'm like kind of joking about that, obviously, but like if Oso's going to play center, you put him next to a big who is as big, if not bigger than Oso is, who can also stretch the floor. And that's just going to be like how you kind of have to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, here's one guy that can do that. Bol. We talked about him. 3-point percentage. I said it at 38. We all went over, but the people went under.
Wow.
And he shot 34%.
I'm proud of the people for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Not overconfident in Bol. He had a great season shooting from three last year. Never found a way onto the court this year. And if Chris Haynes is to be believed, I hadn't told you about this, Sam. The reason he lost his minutes was that when Mason Plumlee and Steven Adams got into that scuffle, which if you don't know, Max, Mason Plumlee, Steven Adams got into a scuffle in a Houston game. Big surprise, right? A whole bunch of teammates sort of ran into the scuffle, helped out, pushed guys apart, yada, yada, yada. That entire time, Bol was just standing under the rim, who was playing, shooting layups, just kind of slowly shooting, not paying attention to what was happening with the scuffle, ignoring his teammates that are potentially getting in a fight. And if Chris Haynes is to be believed, Mike Budenholzer absolutely hated that. And he basically didn't play again after that, including, by the way, at the end of the season, when the Suns are getting their asses kicked, the crowd at home was chanting, "We want Bol." And Mike Budenholzer said no. And he didn't play him. And his games were over. The season was over at this point, and he still didn't play him. I guess to teach him a lesson in some ways. Absolutely disappointing season from Bol. We hoped he would be kind of fun this year at the very least. Couldn't play at all. Wasn't very good. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, meh. I mean, even dumber or worse is the Budenholzer thing. That's insane. Maybe you get mad at him, or try to point out like, hey, you got to back up your teammates, but you bench him for the rest of the season. That seems like a little draconian.
Yeah.
I believe I was calling Bol at the beginning of the year like a sneaky 7th man of the year candidate, and he was not that. Let's just say he wasn't that.
Did you invent that 7th man of the year candidate? I haven't heard that one before.
No, I did not invent it, but I'm happy to stand on business for 7th man of the year and petition the league.
It's a great idea. If you were a writer still, Sam, that would be a great article. I would read that article.
I'd probably butcher it. Zach Lowe would do a great job.
He's not a writer. He's just a podcaster now. Zach Lowe back, by the way. He's great. I've been listening to every episode. Yeah, thank God. Exactly. It's actually a great time. I mentioned this to you guys before we started recording. I'm having a really great time watching the playoffs right now. First of all, I love the first round because there's basketball on constantly. Like as soon as I get home, I just watch all night. There's a Knicks game on now. I don't know who won.
Pistons up 6.
The Detroit Pistons won.
Pistons up 6.
Wow.
3 seconds left. They're going to win.
Incredible. And also relevant to the Suns.
No, seriously.
I think.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Because if the Knicks lose this series...
Max, you don't even know.
I
don't blame you for not keeping up with all of our KD trades that we've made on this pod, but there have been like 7 of them already. And
wow.
The Knicks, the Rockets, the Timberwolves. Who am I missing?
I have heard those names.
The Mavericks.
Like
the Mavericks.
All the teams that if they go out early, not the Mavericks.
The Spurs.
The other ones.
The Spurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a certain point we pivoted, Max, and we just started doing 1 KD trade per episode.
I love it. Yeah. What else are you gonna do?
With a couple weeks of trying to find Beal trades that we snuck in there, but yeah.
Well, I'll say this. I just to finish my point here. Watching the playoffs with zero stress at all, just zero stress, is pretty fun. Now, of course, I prefer the Suns to be in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would rather have the Suns in the playoffs. But, like, every time the Suns played, that entire day, I'm an absolute mess. No matter what, I could hardly concentrate on anything else. Once the basketball game starts, I usually settle in and I'm able to watch basketball. But I'm stressed out the entire time. Now I'm watching the playoffs. Zero stress. Don't care who wins. Very much becoming I'm just rooting for a good game kind of guy watching these playoffs, and I'm having a great time. That's all I'm saying. Are you watching now, Max?
I'm with you.
Yeah?
Yeah, I watched most of the games this weekend. I mean, the Clippers and the Nuggets was awesome. That game was so
Incredible.
much fun to watch. I kind of started to fall in love with the Clippers a little bit. I think they made me a team I root for. Like, I really like that team.
I get it.
Just the way they're built.
I get it. It's very much, they very much saw the future of the NBA, and they tried to capitalize on that, including ducking the second apron, by the way, which they did a good job doing, and made the right decision letting Paul George go.
Yep.
Grayson Allen, 3-point attempts per game. We put the over-under at 6. I went over. Sam, you went over. Max, you went under, and the people went over. He went under. Lost a lot of minutes this year because of somebody like Ryan Dunn, for example, but still found a way to shoot 5.5 per game. I don't know, like, his 3-point attempt rate. I'm guessing it was higher than last year, where he shot about 6 last year. But played less minutes per game this year because he started most games last year and still ended up shooting 5.5 per game.
Yeah.
It's a weird season where I think there's a world where you could be happy with the way Grayson Allen played, but this team was so bad. I don't care who of this group is on this team next year other than Ryan Dunn, Oso Ighodaro, and Devin Booker. So
to answer your question, Mike, he did take more threes on a permanent basis. He went up from 6.4 per 36 to 8.2, and a higher percentage of his field goal attempts were 3-point attempts this year. 72% of Grayson's shots were threes. So he took a lot. He did his job. He just could not play as many minutes. Was wholly unimpressed with Grayson's ability to impact the game defensively, but I do still like who he is as an offensive player. Mostly, I love who he is as a shooter. I know you don't like him as a playmaker, and you're right for that.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you guys would be like, is Grayson a bad contract? Is he just like a mediocre contract? Because he signed to this 4-year deal that I think at the time everyone praised that extension, and I guess I don't think it's bad, but here are the numbers: 3 more years, 16.9 next year, 18.1, 19.4 for the last year.
We are in the era where the Cavs have to go up a lot, right? So it's probably about even, maybe slightly underwater. But again, he could be awesome next year and play his way to being slightly above water. I feel like we'll go back and forth in that contract probably once or twice before it's said and done.
I think that's like a perfectly acceptable contract that, if I were them, I'd be trying to combine with Royce O'Neal this summer and see if that can get you something in the 25 to 30 range that's more interesting. I just don't know.
Center, maybe, yeah.
I guess I would be hoping that other teams, like for other teams to bite on Grayson Allen, they have to really value the shooting. And the shooting is very important, don't get me wrong. It's just, can he bring enough else to the table at that price tag?
Yeah, it's just he's the number one victim of the roster construction of the Suns, probably, how bad it was. Like, on Orlando, I think he would be great,
so
right?
True.
If on the right team, he'd be awesome. It didn't make any sense on this team.
Old reliable Orlando. We mention them for every fake trade.
Every week,
Max.
every week we find a way to
They're easy to
shove
trade
Orlando
to.
into our trades because
They need shooting so bad.
They're a horrible
Everyone's
offensive
doing it.
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grayson is one where I would be okay if he was on the Suns next year if the roster construction was so that he is not competing with a bunch of other
Shooting guards.
6'5" guys for minutes. Yeah, if he is just a backup to Devin Booker who can also play with Devin Booker when Booker's at point guard, which is a good thing to have. I think a player that can successfully do that, who shoots a lot of threes, who tries on defense, is not the greatest, at creating, but can dribble the ball down in a pinch if you need a guy to dribble the ball down. He's capable of that.
Yeah, if the team...
So
it's not that hard to imagine this, right? It was 2 seasons ago. I think we
that's
watched
true.
it.
It's
right?
just,
fine.
because Grayson doesn't bring much to the table defensively, that's why it's so paramount that the guys around him do. Like, it can't be next year. We have Devin Booker and Grayson Allen and Royce are still here, and also here's Jalen Green. They can't just build a team around 6'5" shooting guards, again, to Mike's point.
no more Beal helps a lot. Grayson.
Yep.
Like, it just helps. Let's talk about 3-point attempts for the Suns overall. This was a huge topic before the season, and it's something that we obviously talked about here on the podcast. 37.5 per game is what I set the line at. They shot 38 per game, so it was right there. We all went under except for the fans. The people went over and nailed that one. It was very close, obviously. I think they finished like not very high. Like for as many threes as they shot, teams just shoot a lot of threes now. Every team
they shot,
shoots a lot
for
of threes.
context, 32.6 the year before under Frank Vogel, where of course they were a better team, but none of us were happy with the amount of threes they were taking. So for them to, like, this was one of Bud's only successes of the entire season. He successfully got them to shoot 5.5 more threes per game. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. They shot up into the top. Wow, they weren't even in the top 10, but still. That's what I'm saying. They got to 12th. They got from 25th to 12th in 3-point volume in one season. That's not bad.
It's a fascinating thing now. And I'm curious what you think about this, Max. I kind of think that with every team shooting a lot of threes now, it's sort of flattening how much that actually impacts your ability to be better. Like, you can't just take advantage of shooting more threes because everyone's doing it now. You can't just be the Houston Rockets that's shooting way more than everyone else, and that gives you the advantage. Now, keep in mind that the Boston Celtics are still currently doing that. They're shooting 50 a game or whatever, or at least trying to shoot 50 a game, so there still is a number you can reach to get even higher. But because every team is shooting that many threes or 38 or more like that, you need to find other avenues to exploit inefficiencies by the other team. And I think so much of that is becoming playing faster. Once again, it always has been, but playing faster is even more evident now, which means you need more athletes and also forcing more turnovers or getting offensive rebounds, one or the other. Like if the Houston Rockets, for example, have any chance in beating the Golden State Warriors, they need to get 15 offensive rebounds a game in order to take advantage of that. But the Suns couldn't do any of that, and I think that's what impacted the season the most. But what do you think, Max?
Yeah, I agree. And, I was going to mention the Boston Celtics. I guess they're kind of the counterexample to what you're saying. But that is the case. And, I'm not going to get all old man crotchety Max on this. I do hate the 3-point thing. But I do like, to your point, now that it's sort of like evened out where everyone's doing it, now you have to kind of zag a little bit whenever Rose is digging, right? So we're going to see some different styles, and maybe that's what Ishbia has in mind with sort of his defensive identity sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the way the NBA has gone towards everyone just shooting threes all the time. I find it less fun to watch. So I hope that there will be some changes with how that goes.
I don't think every team could do what the Celtics are doing anyway, just because the personnel is the reason they're capable of doing it. They just have so many good shooters, including bigs, who can shoot threes, but like you have Drew Holiday that'll take a pull-up three on every fast break. You have Derek White, who may not even start, that can do it as well. And then you have Porzingis, you have Al Horford, and then of course, the rest of the team is all capable shooters. You could try to shoot 50 threes, but for most teams, I think that'll end up not going well.
And then
it means like
on
3
the
or
other
4 of
end,
your players are shooting 12 or 13 a game.
Sorry to slander, our team's best player here, who is Kevin Durant. I do believe that our team's best player is Kevin Durant, our most talented player right now, not Devin Booker. So you can give me credit for that. KD stands at least. But KD is incapable of doing that Drew Holiday, Peyton Pritchard thing where he takes what is potentially a bad shot early in the shot clock, right?
But he still had a career high in 3-point attempts, didn't he?
I know. Well, but that's the crazy thing is he took more, and he is still so far off from what like the modern. And it wasn't just KD, like it's an issue with Beal, it's an issue with all the guys on our team, but I'm just using KD as like the focal point because that's kind of who the identity of this offense is based around. In another 6, 7, 8 years with the guys coming out of college now and AAU and how they train them, everyone's going to be taking, you're not going to like it, Max, but the amount of pull-up transition threes being taken, guys like Kevin Durant right now in 2025 are going to be like, Al Jefferson in 2014 living in the paint. Clip this part, Mike. They're going to love this.
You're right.
KD now is going to be Al Jefferson's paint in 2014.
We're just going to start seeing the Steph Curry influence, right?
It's just going to be
the whole generation came up with that.
It's going to be a complete lost art to kind of hold the ball a little bit longer and make like, level-headed, efficient decisions on the one hand, but decisions that just are not like fast enough within the flow of the game to hit the requisite volume that you really need to be competitive in today's game. That isn't, of course, unless eventually the league steps in and says, this is ridiculous, it's hurting the product, and we need some rule changes. Rule changes could balance it out at any point, but that's a different can of worms.
To your point, KD finished the season 6 3-point attempts. I guess he had one season where he shot 6.1, and it was OKC 2013-14 where he was the MVP. And also actually 2017-2018 he also did as well. Jason Tatum, you can argue Jason Tatum is like the modern version of what Kevin Durant is, the young Kevin Durant. Now you can argue with what that means in today's NBA. Tatum shot 10.1 3-point attempts per game. That's 4 more. It's just so much. There's so much more. It's 1 more per quarter. And that seems like when you put it as 1 more per quarter, it doesn't sound like a lot, but the difference is almost double what he took. Like that's just a lot more 3-point attempts. And that's kind of what I guess we're going to see more and more of as the NBA goes along. Bradley Beal.
Here it is.
We're talking about disappointments this season. That Bradley Beal was number 1. This man gave up. You should be happy you missed this, Max. This man gave up halfway through the season. At a certain point, he just stopped playing home games for a while, and he did not play well defensively. He did not make well for others. He didn't score as well as he's capable of, and genuinely looked like he didn't care about halfway through the season.
The stats don't even do it justice with Beal, I think, because you can look at Beal's box score stats and still say, well, okay, that's like, his per 36 numbers here, 19, 4, and 4. That's like what a third option should look like. He actually shot the ball well, shot 39% from deep this year, 50 from the field. The stats don't do it justice, just how miserable the experience was of watching Bradley Beal. How little he gave a shit on the entire defensive end. How the extent to which the entire team's net rating collapsed every single time he entered a 5-man lineup. Like, you need to dig into if you dig into like the advanced stats, then that has it. But the basic box score, to anyone out there, like, Suns fans know, but to anyone who's not a Suns fan and is somehow under the impression that Bradley Beal scrounged together a decent season, he did not. It was a completely miserable year.
Almost no impact on winning. I mean, no positive impact, I should say. Plenty of negative impact on winning. But just like it's like the stat. Like, I've never seen a player whose stats impacted what was actually happening on the floor less than him.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, if you think about just how bad Jusuf Nurkic was, the Suns were worse when Bradley Beal played. Yikes. From a net rating perspective. I set the over-under for points per game at 20. We expected somewhat of a bounce-back season for him. After what I think was now, you can look at as a good season under Frank Vogel. Everyone went under except you, Max, sorry to say. And he went under. He scored 17 points per game this year. And I don't want to spend too long talking about him because hopefully he'll be gone soon. We never have to talk about him again, other than the salary we talk about on our episodes when we talk about the cap.
I do have a question for you guys. Do you think, just like if we can do a little more slander here, like, will Bradley Beal ever be a playoff level starter again? Is that phase of his career just over? Because part of it is like, yes. I think he could go up and hit that 20-point per game mark again next year. It just has to be on a bad team where he's getting empty stats.
The only way he'll ever matter on a winning team again is if he's just like a 7th, 8th, 9th man and accepts his role totally, which I don't think he'll do. So I don't really see him ever mattering again.
Like, if he was in Jalen Green's spot on the Rockets, is that kind of what you're thinking, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, the entire infrastructure around him needs to be perfect, and you really need to get him in the right mindset where he just cares in a way that we never saw, like, an ounce of that competitive spirit this year on the Suns. And the expectations were high, the stakes were high, but he just could not meet the moment. So, yeah.
Don't mention Drew Holiday around him.
I mean, Drew Holiday.
Oh, boy, will it make him mad.
Drew Holiday just being the perfect antithesis to exactly everything that we've come to hate about Bradley Beal. And the fact that he's so offended by that comparison, I'm not sure if you saw that one, Max.
I did. That was the only story where I agreed with Bud's side. I was like, what are you so mad about?
Yeah, really, the Suns would have been awesome if he played like Drew Holiday this year. Devin, by the way, Drew Holiday, yesterday was amazing. He really turns it on in the playoffs. He's really awesome. Devin Booker points per game, I said it at 27. This is, I think, a good point to talk, or good opportunity to talk about the season Devin Booker had, which I think by all stats was a disappointment. Other than his assists, which he became one of the, well, he already was, but even better, one of the best playmakers in the NBA as far as creating 3-point shots and just more buckets for other players. Sam, you were the only one to go under here. You were right. 27 points per game. At 25.6 is what he finished with. You talked about what you think is the best solution for this team, Max, but overall, what do you think about Devin Booker this season or even next season and what he could look like next year?
I don't blame this season on him. I think he's a casualty of everything that was going on. Mostly, I mean, we just, what was one thing that was sad about this, he just came off that amazing Olympic thing, right? When he and KD, and we all kind of felt like, okay, the stink is washed off. Booker has this shine on him now. This is going to be great. And that ended fast. I really do think that if they just completely reform this roster, not necessarily more talented, in fact, almost certainly less talented, but just guys who care all around Booker, like, I can see them being a really feisty, fun 6 or 7 seed. Him having his best year ever individually. Devin Booker now, his stats. Back to being second team All NBA. That's all still there for me with him. To me, this is almost all a casualty of what was going around him.
What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, just up and down season for Book. I think, the big success to talk about here underratedly is his availability. A guy with as many miles as Book has at this point. He played 75 games, and he played 37 minutes a game. Him and KD both had to put the team on their backs whenever they were on the court, and just way, way, way too many games where those guys were having to play 37, 38, 39, 40 minutes just for them to even be close in the fourth quarter. So hopefully they're not, exactly in that same situation with Book next season, although let's be honest, they probably will be the way things are going. But just for him to be there after the Olympics, still playing 75 games, playing 37 a night, that's really impressive. But then couple it with lack of team success, efficiency dipping. He didn't make an all-star team this year, which is unfortunate. The West was just too tough, too many good players, and the Suns weren't good enough. There was no way they deserved a second all-star after KD. So, those are things I think about with Book. I think about the fact that, if the Suns were an Eastern Conference team, Book would be a 9-time All-Star already, which bothers me. as we talk about,
if he was just drafted to the Lakers or the Celtics, he would be a 9-time All-Star.
That's true too. But if he was, how many All-Star teams did Joe Johnson make? I don't know, but it feels like he made 12. And Book is here, and he's about to turn 29 years old, and he's sitting at 4. And that, stuff like that as we get towards, the second half of Devin Booker's career and the second half of his prime, is stuff that upsets me a little bit, but I still have faith in who he can be with a team built around him. He needs another offensive engine, though. That I'm very confident in.
But he doesn't need one that's like Kevin Durant.
Right.
I think the fundamental story the last couple of years is just that those two are really just too similar as players. It didn't really ever work.
Yeah.
They didn't figure out the my turn, your turn thing at all.
Yeah, weirdly not complementary unless they're playing under FIBA rules, apparently.
Right.
In some ways, I think if you think about just how dysfunctional this season was or some of the stuff you hear behind the scenes, the season that Booker and Durant had were kind of impressive in some ways just because it was an absolute disaster and a mess the entire season from really early on, as you picked up on, Max. And then they tried to trade Kevin Durant without talking to him, which I continually describe as the actual end of the season. It was over at that point. If they had any chance to even make the play-in, that was gone once you tried to trade Kevin Durant without even talking to him. And, 25.6 and 7 assists a game. Pretty good season overall, just not good enough to be successful with this team. Same exact stats on a winner, he'd be on an All-NBA team. He'd be third team All-NBA this year. But those stats on a losing team, not good enough. Just wasn't good enough. And we'll see what it looks like next year. They're obviously going to build their identity around him and try to figure out ways to complement him.
Last thing I'll say about Book,
big test for Matt Ishbia there.
Big test for Matt Ishbia, big test for Booker too, in the sense, and I know there's a lot of pressure on him. He's playing a lot of minutes, yada yada. But some of the failings of the Suns being the 29th best defense in the NBA this year, it was not a good defensive campaign for Book, and so it's not just as simple next year as, losing Beal is addition by subtraction, which I do think might be true. And we need more athletes around him who can play fast and yada, yada. Book himself needs to be better on defense, and hopefully he will be.
It's the only way it's going to work. If you want your identity to be tough, hard-nosed, he doesn't have to be like an all-defense player. He just has to play tough, hard-nosed defense as well as he possibly can, because that's how you become a leader. You have to lead the team that way, so he has to do it.
Yeah, and we've seen him get there, obviously, in the past. He's really a dependent defensive player. Like, he's not gonna lead your defense. He's just gonna have to be like a cog in it if it's the rest of it's good.
Yeah, I mean, he really doesn't get targeted much, like on the ball. Off the ball, he does, because he can fall asleep a little bit off the ball, let guys cut, give open threes to the other team. They're just not going to force a switch and then go at him over and over again. He actually does a good job in those scenarios. He also needs to foul less. But if you have the right scenario identity-wise, where you got a bunch of guys that are ultra physical, that will actually help him in that they'll call less fouls, because that's how refs are. Last player one, Kevin Durant points per game, 27 was the over-under. We all went under, including the people, and he went under, 26.6. The Kevin Durant haters that we all are, we were correct in this season. Durant finished with 26.6 points per game. Very odd season to root for Durant, where halfway through the season he spent his time online sort of fighting with Suns fans on Twitter, and obviously they tried to trade him, and fans are antagonizing him on the daily. And I think he was overall extremely good at scoring, not great at running the offense or leading the offense, like as a playmaker for others, but still an insanely efficient scorer. What do you think about what you saw of Kevin Durant's season this year, Max?
Yeah, I'll go beyond this season. It's going to be one of the weirdest superstar eras in Phoenix sports history, right? Because it's not like we traded for him and he was washed up, which has happened before. He wasn't washed up. He was still awesome. He wasn't MVP for him, but he was awesome. The best player on our team. I agree with Sam in saying that. But the whole thing just leaves you cold, right? Like, there's not going to be a lot of like amazing Kevin Durant moments we all remember. I think not all of it was his fault. Again, I think we all agree that it wasn't a great partnership with Booker, and obviously the coaching was bad the whole time, and the roster construction was bad. But yeah, it's something about it. When you have somebody on the level of Kevin Durant, like he's one of those guys like LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, right? You just expect him to sort of succeed and bring your team to the highest levels kind of by himself, and it just didn't ever happen.
Yeah, us believing that he could achieve that, I guess, was kind of our own failing, right? That he would be able to live up to that ideal as a 36-year-old. I mean, Mike, I agree with your assessment completely. Like, still one of one as a scorer. Don't always love the way he plays as a scorer, but look, I get it. That's just who he is. You can only change him so much. The defense, we just didn't like. In theory, KD's a great defender. 6 years ago, he was an elite defender. These days, it's like when he wants to be, he can be a good defender for a few possessions, and then he takes the next few possessions off. And it just wasn't good enough. Wasn't good enough for the culture. Wasn't good enough in terms of leadership. KD still is holding on to this idea that, I mean, he literally said on Twitter the other day that he thinks he's one of the best leaders. What did he say? In the NBA?
In the history of the
history?
NBA, I think.
I think he said, yeah, Max, I'm not shitting you. I think he said in the history of the sport. Would have been one thing for him to say, I'm one of the best leaders in the NBA. I still wouldn't agree, but okay, that's fine. But for him to say, I'm one of the best leaders in the history of the sport, when everyone knows his approach is kind of just like, take his ball and go home. And like, it's not like he's not doing a massive amount on the court at all times. And I'm sure he works his body super, super hard to be prepared. And he had a fairly durable season as well, all things considered, for a 36-year-old with lots of injury history. But I don't know. I just don't see how, like, I don't know how he could get other people to see that leadership is one of his strong suits with the way the last 5 years of his career has played out.
We don't really know. I give him a lot of credit, I think, for the way he works with young players, because he's always working with young players in a way that I don't think a lot of older superstars do. So I give him some credit there. we don't really know the rest of it, but what I do know is this entire team fell apart 2 seasons in a row. And, I'm not saying that's all his fault, but it is what happened. They fired 3 coaches in his time in Phoenix, and he wasn't here very long. So it's a tough situation to be in, and he deserves some blame for that, and so does Devin Booker, and so does the rest of the players to some extent, although they're not really the leaders of this team. And of course, the front office, coaching staff, and the ownership group all deserve blame for this season. And they're all going to get it. And, Devin Booker's going to be the guy that gets another chance here. And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'll just say when it comes to one of the greatest leaders in NBA history or whatever, Chris Paul was the other leader on this team not too long ago. And I think I can see a pretty stark difference in their leadership. And it's not favorable to Kevin Durant.
Yeah. Mid-season players traded. I set it at 1.5. I just set this one apparently to get a win over you guys because I said over and everyone else went under.
What was it? It was 2, right? Okogie and Nurkic. 2. Yep.
Okogie and Nurkic. Okogie, as we called him, the human trade exception, signed for a contract that was non-guaranteed next year. Although maybe Charlotte will just keep him because he was pretty good there.
It was unfortunate to see, he battled with a little bit of durability issues himself. He only ended up playing 15 games for Charlotte, but I feel like he was pretty good in the games he played, so still really rooting for Josh. He's one of the least miserable players to watch on this team this season.
On our Patreon podcast, Max, we this year started giving out a Dan Marley Hustle Player of the Year of the Week award. So every week we gave out an award to a hustle player, and Josh Okogie was traded very early, right? Not at the trade deadline. It was like January. And until the end of the season, he was still in the lead for the most weeks won for hustle. He just always hustled. And really, the Suns missed him as soon as they traded him. Literally, as soon as they traded him, they were missing him. So,
who did win the actual award?
They haven't given it to anyone. It's possible they won't give it out at all this year.
That's how sad and pathetic this team was. They did not give out the award.
That's so funny.
By the way, quick plug for Patreon. If you want to hear who won our award, we're going to talk about that this week on our Patreon episode. So join if you want to. Last one to really highlight, or last 2, I should say, to really highlight just how optimistic we were last season before the season started. The over-under for wins was 47.5. The over-under for Suns playoff seed was 4.5, meaning if you picked over, you think they'd be the 4 seed or higher. Everyone picked over on both of those. That means all of us picked over for the wins. Everyone, including the fans, picked over for the Sun seed. For the wins, the fan vote, 97.8% picked over. So that means like almost everyone was insanely confident that the Suns would hit the over in wins. And they went over 10 and a half games under that. No, 11 and a half games under that. They won 36. And then, of course, they were not even in the playoffs. They were the 11th seed, tied for the 11th seed, I believe, at the end of the season. Complete disaster, complete disappointment.
Yeah, it was amazing. And if you would have told us that, right after we recorded that podcast, we would have assumed that either Booker, Durant, or both went down, right, for the whole season, whatever it was. And they had pretty much perfect health. Just, it's crazy. And the other thing, too, is it's not like we're all just homers. Like, I think a lot of people were on the Suns before the season started. I know the Bill Simmons podcast thing.
Ryan Russillo,
they're all
Joe
over.
House.
Yeah, a lot of people were on it, and just, whatever we were all seeing did not...
Those guys all locked it in. They locked in.
Yes.
Nurkic didn't hit enough threes. That's all it was. Bud was going to get him to shoot threes. We were all bought in.
It's all Mason Plumlee's fault. For the second year in a row, every problem should be blamed on the backup minimum contract center, and there was nothing else wrong with this team.
I will say on that, I was very happy on Saturday to see that Ben Simmons is playing over Drew Eubanks. That made me really happy. Eubanks is terrible, and I'm glad that the Clippers...
He was awful, yes. But I do think that Mike Budenholzer press conference really did get us all excited. Like, there was a lot of reasons to be excited. Budenholzer, it's a fascinating thing where, like, I was so stoked to have him as a coach and could not be more happy that he's gone and fired at this point. He did not do a good job at all. And they got a lot of decisions to make over the next few weeks. Is there anyone you definitely want to see on the team next year, Max? Even if they're not on the Suns currently.
Whoa, that's quite a question. The rookies for sure. There's no reason to trade them, I don't think. And then, I mean, listen, as much as I think it's the right intellectual decision, I don't want Booker to be on a different team. That'd be sad.
Yeah.
So I want to see him.
Well, fascinating year. Really disappointing. Max, you want to come back next year and do this again?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I might even watch the games to start next season, depending on how it goes.
Oh, we expect you to watch at least October, November, December.
Gambo was saying recently on the radio last week, he was giving a guarantee that the Suns would be better next season just through these various addition by subtractions. Obviously, Gambo can't tell the future as much as maybe some people believe he can. But I am inclined to agree with him on this one. I think there is no way, at the very least.
Are you guaranteeing it?
There's no way they won't be way more fun. They could win 36 games.
It doesn't take much.
They could win 36 games and be 3 times as fun. We can all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
It's just going to be way easier for them to not be so horribly miserable, right? Because the expectations are going to be lower, and any amount of success they have at all will be fun. So yes, I think
they're going to do our Trae Young trade idea, Mike. They're gonna
Oh,
trade
God,
Bradley
what?
Beal for Lauri Markkanen.
How bored did you guys get?
50 cents on the dollar. It's what Bill Simmons said, Max. We're going to take advantage. We have 50 cents. That's all we have.
We're going to spend all summer, after we've failed at building Chris Paul in the aggregate, we're going to spend all summer trying to build KD in the aggregate. We're going to be like,
hey, he turns it over.
I have OG Anunoby. That's enough. It would be a lot of fun in some ways. So we'll figure it out.
Max, thank you so much for joining us year after year. We appreciate you, especially in this year where it was an absolute pain to watch the Suns all season. Do you have anything you want to tell the people about before you go here?
No, although I think I made maybe a similar speech last time we finished this, which is not good for the Suns, but it's never as bad as it seems, right? Usually the world is never as bad as it seems and never as good as it seems. It's usually somewhere a little less. So I think that the Suns will, as we just mentioned, be more fun sooner than later. So bright times will be hopefully.
Matt Ishbia was guaranteeing multiple championships at his press conference the other day, Max. I'm not sure if you saw that.
God.
I would say that
was he talking about OKC?
I also would guarantee.
He was talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, actually.
I also would guarantee that the Phoenix Suns will win a championship before the heat death of the universe. It will happen at some point.
Max, thank you for joining us.
I like it. Thanks, guys.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.